While I'm on this internationalist or in practice being an anti internationalist in the way that the word is commonly used, tear, let me talk about the euro for a little bit. I see a lot of discussion about the European Union and sort of related issues as just falling into this, cosmopolitanism versus nationalism. Sort of dichotomy. People that are anti-EU are xenophobic, are want their just like quiet little national bubble. And people who are in favor of it want to build this thing, and that's just this whole big issue that I'm not that sort of like I said with this previous internationalist stuff, just not super engaged with. Europe being a bunch of little countries or one giant country, whatever. Doesn't really matter to me the size of the unified block over there. I don't have some huge, like, large countries over small countries preference or vice versa. Um, but so then getting a little less, theoretical, I find myself sort of on the anti EU side mainly because the euro and EU fiscal rules are such a nightmare, um, that the European Union like bylaws forbid running up large deficits essentially. And given that that's what you need to overcome recessions, it basically just forbids good economic policy during recessions. And you can see that with how much of Europe has never escaped from the recession starting in 2007. And then to add insult to injury, what the euro does is it's not just that they're not allowed to do sensible anti-austerity sort of economic policies, it's also that the euro can enforce that preference. If an EU country that doesn't use the euro decides to start printing and spending a lot of money, it might get like in trouble with the other European powers and be an issue, but they could do it. Um, if you have the euro, you don't have your own central bank. You're dependent on the European Central Bank, the ECB, and they will crush you if you try to do that. And just like it's not your currency. I mean, what would happen if one European country could just print as many euros as it wanted? Greece prints 1 trillion euros and buys half of the rest of Europe. Like that, I can see why you don't want to give that unlimited spending power to a subpart of your currency system. But it just means that so these countries are trapped. And so these places like, everywhere in Southern Europe, Portugal and Spain and Italy and Greece, they just have mass unemployment. And the obvious problem is that there's a demand shortfall. They have all of this capacity in terms of people and productive resources that are not being put to use. And they're not allowed to mobilize that capacity via deficit spending. Um, and that's just the long and short of what's going wrong with the European economy. And the only way to escape that is to either drastically change how the euro works or stop using the euro for those countries. And so there's this talk with Merkel and Macron about setting up like some kind of joint European Union fiscal policy. The idea being that it would be, a way to counteract this. And this is what people talk about all the time. That the monetary union needs to be accompanied by a fiscal union in order for things to work, and so they're taking that on board. But then the problem is that the like prerequisite for these negotiations is this idea that we don't want transfer payments. We don't want money from Germany going to Italy. They don't want the rich countries of the European Union to be put in the position of permanently subsidizing the poor countries in the European Union or the relatively poor countries in the European Union forever slash until they've equalized their wealth levels. And that's a problem because you got to have that if you're going to have an actual fiscal union. You know, the rich American states like the Northeast or the West Coast subsidize the poor American states like the South. Just sending a lot of money there every year, and in the form of, you know, we pay taxes to the federal government, and then they spend without concern for, oh, this place put in more taxes, so we better spend more there. You know, they just spend based on need. And so that's what the EU government, if it had a fiscal union, should sensibly be doing. And they refuse. You know, there's this thing, oh, the Germans don't want to be sending money to those Southern Europeans. Man, so maybe they're the ones who aren't internationalist enough. You know, that the supposedly, oh, let's bring us together internationalism turns out to be fucking the opposite. It's the whole thing is this national self-interest that stops them from fixing the EuroZone. You know, that it turns out that the rich countries in the EU, Germany being the most important, are so unwilling to sort of lose out in the sense of subsidizing some of their fellow Europeans, that they're willing to just wreck the EU. You know, they're just like, you know what? Fuck that project. Except for they don't think about it that way. They're just like, why don't we just keep going like this forever? And those, you know, Southern European countries will just be in our periphery, and they'll be much poorer than we are, and we will dominate them economically, and they'll have high unemployment, and like, whatever, we're doing well, which is pretty fucked up. And so you can see why those Southern European countries, with that being the German attitude, would want to leave the EU. I would fucking want to if I lived in those countries. I mean, perfectly good other option, turn the EU into one giant country with giant permanent transfer payments. And if it's not going to work out that way, ditch this fiscal union, or ditch this monetary union and the joke attempts to turn it into a fiscal union without transfers. So yeah, that's my advice for you Europeans. You know, you've gotten yourself into a real hole over there, and people are going to really, really not like all of the potential solutions. And you just got to go with one. You know, your current situation's a nightmare. You got to fix it. I hope you fix it sooner rather than later, and you just gotta bite the bullet one way or the other. And if you're a Southern European country, you don't control Germany. You know, you can't pick which way to bite the bullet. You can perfectly sensibly have ongoing, you know, have your representatives in the European Parliament and have your national leaders be pushing. Oh, you know, if you really like the idea of a unified Europe, be pushing the fiscal union with transfers. That totally makes sense. But it doesn't look great that they could force that. And so your option is, you know, stick with it and hope, or just bail, or just be like, you know, maybe if they fix it, I'll be back. But until then, I'll see ya. So yeah, it's not great, but that is just the way it is. And, if the euro manages to blow up the whole European project, no skin off my nose, but your reach exceeded your grasp, people who are into the European project. And now you got to pay the piper.